Hey everybody, David Rice. Welcome back to IgniteDDS and our little legal series we've got going on with expert extraordinaire Hillary. Hillary, how are you today?
Good, how are you?
Fantastic. Doing well. Weekend's coming up, life is good, sun's out, ready to roll.
Nice.
Yeah, so listen, we have had great conversation so far. We talked about one of the major pathways to practice around the young dentist, and I want to own my own practice and go out there and purchase. So in episode 1, we talked about preparation and all that comes with that, and building the right team and how to find them. Last time we talked about buying a solo practice, how to make that process really smooth. That's the bar here.
Low. Yes.
I think that's what my poor wife did.
I like it, yeah.
And today we're going to talk about the associate buy-in, partnership buy-in process. So what's the difference really between that and buying a solo practice? How are they different?
So there's sort of the obvious difference of a solo practice. Buying a solo practice is just going to be you're a solo practitioner. And then a buy-in is going to be you're buying into an existing practice. So you're partnering up with another dentist or multiple dentists. And there's pros and cons of each. Some people love being a solo dentist. They get to be their own boss. They don't have to worry about another owner. But, the cons would be maybe, you don't have someone else to be there with you. They don't share the responsibilities. Time off can be kind of difficult, as opposed to maybe a partnership where it's nice because you do have another dentist there to consult with, to share in responsibilities, both financial, staffing. But then, you have to deal with another person. So you have to make decisions with another person, and you have to sort of share those decision-making capacities. So that's sort of the big difference in terms of just in general. From a legal standpoint and from buying a practice standpoint, one of the biggest differences between a solo practice and a buy-in is, as if you saw our last video, usually with a solo practice, you just buy the assets of the company. You don't buy the actual company. With an associate buy-in, you almost always will buy into the company itself. So due diligence when you're doing a buy-in is much more critical because you want to make sure that the company you're buying in doesn't have a lot of baggage, in terms of liability or lawsuits or anything like that. So, because you're going to end up assuming those liabilities once you buy into the practice. So there's really 2 ways to do a buy-in. One of the most popular ways, and the one I always recommend, is an associate buy-in. You're an associate, and usually somewhere in your employment contract it says, after a certain period of time, maybe 1 to 2 years, you'll be able to buy into the practice. This is great because you really get to know the dentist that you're about to buy in. I always compare a partnership with a marriage. You're contractually bound to this person, and divorcing them is going to be really, really difficult. So you want to make sure that you do it right. An associate buy-in is sort of like you're dating them for a little while, before you kind of make that huge commitment. So that's something that I always recommend. You can also do it straight up too. You can just, if you find a practice for sale and they just want to do a straight up buy-in, that works too. But then you're going to go on a little bit more blind. So like I said, the biggest thing is you're actually buying into the practice. So you still go through the same process as a solo. You do, your LOI, your purchase agreement, your closing, your bill of sale. But the biggest difference is that because you're buying into a business, you're going to also either revise or draft a shareholder bylaw agreement or an operating agreement, depending on if you're a corporation or an LLC. Now, those agreements basically outline how you're going to run the business, how you're going to make decisions, and that ends up being, in my experience, some of the more contentious negotiations, because if a seller has been there for a while, and they've been on their own for a while, and they're bringing in a partner, it's really hard for them to give up control. So you want to make sure that as a buyer, you receive equal consideration for either the equity or the shares that you're buying. So if you're going in 50-50, you should have 50-50 voting rights. There should be no because he's a senior dentist, he gets a little bit more. No. Keep it equal. Make sure that your decision-making capacities are the same because you're buying that, you're buying that equity. So that's probably my biggest tip to new dentists buying into a practice. And there are a couple other, fun ways to do that as well, but that's probably for another video. It'll take me all day to explain it. So
No, that's a lot there.
right.
Yeah, you're so right. This is like a marriage, and unfortunately, a lot of associations want partnership.
Right.
Fail at an equal percentage rate in dentistry. So, with that, if we're entering this agreement, we want to do this the right way. Are there any further steps you should take as a young dentist to really make sure you're going to be on the successful side of those percentages?
Right. So again, I would go back to hiring your professionals. Make sure, especially with a partner buy-in, that you have someone representing you. I don't know how many times I've been hired by a dentist who signed an operating agreement or signed a shareholder agreement, and their rights were completely diminished in those agreements because they didn't have someone look it over for them. And now they want to get out and they can't. Or if they do get out, it's going to be almost life ruining. So just be really sure you have someone representing, because those agreements don't push those agreements to the side, or don't just take them as they are. Revise them so that your rights are protected. That would be my number one advice.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. Young dentists, you have to understand it as the seller or the person bringing you in as a partner. And I'm not writing the document as a dentist, so we may have a really strong relationship. However, my attorney hired by me is always going to look out for my best interest.
Yeah.
Position the document that we present to you in the most favorable light to me. So that's such great advice to even we make it along, we make it best friends. It's just part of this process to have professionals represent you, the young dentist. So your team can say, no, wait a second here. We know Dave's a nice guy, but great advice. So, okay. Last question, and this is a $1 million question for sure. How, if I'm a young dentist, do I know that I'm looking at the right partner who could fit for me? I don't know that.
So again, it's kind of like a marriage. Obviously, you got to get along. That's the number one thing. If you don't get along, it's definitely not going to work. The other biggest thing I always tell people is you have to be able to make decisions together. And one of the best tests of being able to make these decisions together is the actual sale itself. If you guys can't decide on who's going to have different voting rights, who's going to do this, how are you going to decide on other big issues that pop up with the practice? Because they're going to happen. So you really got to be able to make decisions together. You need to have similar leadership styles, or at least complementary leadership styles, because you're going to be leaders in your practice. You can't both be passive aggressive and just let the staff walk all over you. You have to have either complementary or similar leadership styles so that you can both lead together, because that's what you're trying to do, because you're partners, you're leading together. The other one would be similar work ethic. I don't know how many times I've had clients that complain about their partners because here they're working 50 hours a week and their partner's working 10 or something like that, and it really breeds resentment, especially if, depending on your compensation formulas, you want to make sure that you have similar work ethics, that one isn't carrying the load for the other. The other one is spending habits, because you guys are going to have to spend money together. And if one wants to spend a ton of money on expensive CEs to like Hawaii, and the other one is much more conservative and they want to put everything towards retirement, you're going to have issues. And I think one of the most important ones is patient philosophy. You want to make sure that you have similar patient philosophies, and that you're, a team in that regard. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And, again, a little bit deeper than we're going to go today, but now I'm thinking there's like so much more for us to dive into. Once you feel like you have found that right person, that's a lot where this operating agreement really comes in, because it's like every relationship at the beginning, everything's wonderful and beautiful. So
yes,
crystal clarity defines how we handle all of these situations, half of which hopefully never occur in effective decisions. instead of, two people fighting for a position because you ultimately agreed upon it. So,
Yep.
I think amazing information, Larry. Thank you so much. And
Mhm.
you have blessed us with an even better bonus for all of you watching. Hillary went like the extra smile on this bad boy. A downloadable resource. It's free to you. So you can click on the link in this video. We'll send it to all the people who watch all the videos, just in case you forget to click the link. But what's that about? It's about smooth transitions.
It's basically what we talked about, but just a lot more in depth, and a lot more tips, a lot more advice. And I tried to get as much in depth as I could, and just to give you a little bit more of the process. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. So listen, we're going to obviously include your information in all of these videos, but wrapping it up today, what's the best way for our tribe to reach out to you?
You can visit my website. It's pinelakelaw.com, and it has all of my contact information. And please feel free to email me with any of your questions. I'm licensed in Minnesota and South Dakota, so I can definitely give more legal advice to people who live there. But if you live outside of those two states, I can at least give you some kind of general information, or at least point you in the right direction for any of your questions that you may have.
Awesome. Hillary, thank you so much. Have a great rest of your week. I really appreciate it. And I'm going down memory lane, and I'm also great things. So I'll stop texting and back at it.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks, guys. Till next time.